Lawrence County Football Show, and I've got my good friend Josh. Josh, how are things out in Ohio?
And it's great out here. How are things back in Newcastle without me?
Oh, we're sailing along, but we're embarking on the 50th anniversary of something that didn't happen anywhere else in the state. I did my research,
All right, let's
and
hear it.
it was tremendous. As really great situation. So we're going to talk about Newcastle, the Red Hurricane, and Union. Now, here's some interesting facts. First of all, picked to be in the top hunt in the MAC. They only had 3 classifications at that time:
Right.
B, A, and double A.
Correct.
They also, the Gardner point system, I don't know if you're aware of it. Gardner was a math teacher at Newcastle, and they modified that Gardner point system in 73 because the 1970 team went undefeated and never made the playoffs. So with this, okay, the 3 classifications, of course, Newcastle was playing at the top. Do you realize who was the top expected teams to be in the Gardner or in the playoffs? First of all, let's talk about the MAC. Who do you think was the top teams to be in the MAC?
That was the highest conference, right?
Right.
That went all the way. I mean,
Yeah.
back then, Central Catholic, North Allegheny, right?
Well,
all those big time schools.
Let me tell you, I probably should have said who the MAC was comprised of. The MAC was comprised of Farrell, Sharon, okay, Newcastle, and also, and I'm setting a link here, so just give me a second. And then it went down to the Valley with Aliquippa, Ambridge, okay, and what have you. Beaver Falls, if you would.
Right.
And, no, Beaver wasn't in it. And let me do this so that in the far south, you had Hopewell.
Okay.
Then you had Ambridge, Aliquippa, Beaver Falls, Newcastle, Farrell, Sharon, Butler, and Elwood City.
Okay.
So in our first question, it would be, who do you think was picked in that group to finish at the top?
You said Aliquippa in that group too, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. Around that time, I mean, just based off Aliquippa's history, right? Aliquippa would probably be up there. Newcastle and Butler were probably the 2 biggest schools, so I would go with Newcastle and Butler, and then I would maybe throw in Beaver Falls and Farrell just because they always have good football
you got 3.
Okay.
Now, I'm even going to give you a 4th one because Aliquippa figured big in this. So they picked Newcastle, Butler, Sharon, who had a great football program up there. And
let me ask you this too, Ange, real quick before you go on. Hickory, would they have been in another conference, or was that school a thing at that point?
They were playing in District.
So,
They were playing in District 10.
Okay, so you figure if you're in that area and you want to play with the big ones, you probably want to go to Sharon instead of Hickory, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
And there was no there was no mall at that time. Hickory was just a wide open area.
Yeah.
So
It would be easy to go wherever you want.
yeah, it was. So Sharon was the school. Now Farrell
That makes sense.
had a great big rivalry, but so Butler, Sharon, Beaver Falls, and Newcastle.
Right.
Now Union was
Mhm.
a small school, but they were playing up. They were actually a Class B school, and I checked this with Padula. I was in 7th grade.
Mhm.
They were playing up because they didn't want to travel, so they were playing
Yeah.
single.
Okay.
Now, what do you think Union's record was in 1972?
You said they were playing up in a high too.
Yeah.
I mean, I would probably between 5 wins.
Well, you were close. They were 4-5 the year before.
Okay.
So one of the gentlemen in there, I'll just call him Mike, said, "Don't worry about us. We're not even going to be anywhere." That was what he told the Union football team. So school started the Wednesday after Labor Day. And with that, there wasn't any games in, there was no week 0. So the Wednesday after Labor Day, bang, okay, they started, and Newcastle in the very first matchup played Sharon. And I told you how it was billed as a really tough game. Well, the Canes came out with a win, 6-0. And yeah, and it was at Sharon. So, matter of fact, just shy at the intersection where 62 is, still sits the Royal Hotel. But that used to be a Howard Johnson's for you people in the area.
Oh, right.
So now we turned that first week. Union, not that many schools had lights, and Union was scheduled to play West Middlesex.
Okay.
Now, the Scotties all set and ready to play. The only thing is, West Middlesex had a teacher strike.
Okay.
So Union won on September 8th by forfeit.
Okay.
So the Scotties, okay, 1-0 by forfeit. The Canes 1-0 by a 6-0 win.
Okay.
The next game, the Canes are coming home. They're going to play Farrell. And you're right. Farrell, pretty decent.
Yeah, I would say.
Decent program. So with that, Canes first home, they end up beating the Steelers 20-12.
Yeah.
Now, Union, okay, they have to go out to New Wilmington. Now, New Wilmington, a big area. Pulaski kids used to go to Union. However, when they did redistricting, those kids ended up going out there to Wilmington.
Okay.
The Scotties come up big at home with a 7-6 victory. And so both teams 2-0. We're going into week 3 now, and the Canes have to play Hopewell. Now, if you hark back, you remember a big player at Hopewell? He went to the University of Pittsburgh. Ended up playing for the Dallas Cowboys. That would be none other than Tony Dorsett.
Oh, I did not know Tony Dorsett went to Hopewell.
Yeah,
I never knew that.
Tony Dorsett went to Hopewell, and Hopewell Stadium at that time only had seating on one side. The Canes had been the Canes had struggled with Hopewell in previous years because of the speed of Tony Dorsett.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams struggle with the speed of Tony Dorsett.
Right.
In pro, college, and high school.
Well, the Canes embarked on the running game. And by controlling the ball and controlling the clock, the Canes walk away with an 18-6 victory.
Oh, wow.
Now, that's pretty impressive. However, Union going to answer this as they had a running back named Rick Adams.
Okay.
The Scotties taking on Slippery Rock. Slippery Rock, a lot of people know now are in District 10.
10.
But Slippery Rock, the Rockets, were members of the Tri-County. So they come to Union, and the Scotties turn out a stellar performance, scoring 42 points and beating Slippery Rock 42-18. Rick Adams had 73 yards on 18 carries. And the Scotties were remaining undefeated. Well, we're getting to the end of the month, and just about this time, 50 years ago, matter of fact, 50 years from tomorrow, in comes Beaver Falls. Now, Beaver Falls, when somebody my age thinks about football, Beaver Falls was like the team that always had to work on getting past Butler and Newcastle. Home of Joe Namath. So,
Yep, a lot of around that time.
Right. And they had a legendary coach. They played their games at Geneva. So, but this game was going to be at Newcastle. Beaver Falls always able to put up points. This no different, as they put up 23 points. A heck of a run for Beaver Falls. But Newcastle put up 46.
I was gonna say 23 may not have been enough to win that game. Well,
So the
especially
and
but Rick Sumner, QB.
Yes.
Right? Coach Ricky back of that team. Am I right?
Ricky Sumner, the quarterback of that team. And keep in mind, Newcastle had players that were going Division I at the end of this season. What was impressive for the Canes is the fact that they had beat, remember I said Sharon and Beaver Falls? They had beat two of their top contenders. Butler only loomed on the horizon. So the Union Scotties went out to Old Bessemer High School because Mohawk was a jointure. The only teams in the Tri-County that weren't a jointure were Sharon, or was Shenango, and Union. So the Scotties go out to Mohawk. They were playing at Bessemer Stadium right in Bessemer. The Scotties come around with a 28-6 victory. Now, the month of September sees both teams undefeated. And not only are both teams undefeated, but, okay, both teams now are looking really good in the modified Gardner point system. So the ability to miss a game is going to be tough. Newcastle's going to get some unexpected help, as the quips from Aliquippa upend Butler. So that puts Butler with one loss as we head into October. October 6th, Ambridge did not have lights. And I got the opportunity to go down to Ambridge with my father, who used to chaperone on the band bus. And Mike Sebastian was the coach down in Ambridge, and he was a Newcastle guy that lived across the street from my grandparents. Okay. The Canes eke out a 7-0 victory on a Saturday.
Playing with no lights. Playing with no lights is probably difficult.
It was rainy and wet, and the trains ran right behind the visitor stands. Mm-hmm. So anybody that was down at Ambridge recently, it was not as nice as it is now. Mm-hmm. The Scotties had to travel out to Laurel. Mm-hmm. Now, not a far travel, but for some reason, the Union Laurel game always seems to be intense.
I think it's a rivalry.
Yeah,
I think it's a big rivalry.
And yeah, it would be a huge rivalry. I would agree with you. So Union travels out there, gets their 5th straight win, and dominates in the win. So Union sits alone atop the Tri-County now. They've got 5 wins. And we're going to October 12th, which kind of is like halfway through the month of October. Well, the Canes, they're taking out Aliquippa at home. And
big game.
Newcastle. Yeah, and keep in mind that Newcastle right now is winning, but they haven't gotten to a situation where they're all struggling. Okay.
I haven't gotten to real test yet.
Right. And that's a good way of putting it. So they end up beating Aliquippa, which at that time people thought of Aliquippa as the 4th place team or worse, because you had to beat Newcastle, Butler, and Beaver Falls. And Beaver Falls' legendary coach, Bruno, was the coach of Joe Namath. So he had a lot of trick plays and things he did. Very creative kind of guy.
A lot of stuff.
Canes, yeah, exactly. So you had to play a really good game against Beaver Falls in order to win.
Yep.
So once again, the Canes come up with a 28-6 victory over the Aliquippa Quips and Don Yanessa, legendary coach in the WPIL. So with that, okay, Union is going to take on Shenango. Now, the Scotties feeling probably pretty good about their season right now because they're undefeated. Well, Shenango gives them a test, and the Scotties eke out Shenango 26-20. Now, the Scotties haven't had that kind of a close game since Wilmington and that 7-6 win. So the Scotties win by 6, and it's time to get ready for the last run through October. This is where it gets interesting, because Newcastle had scheduled Central Catholic. Now, I know your dad's a Central Catholic grad.
That would have been a big time game.
Okay. Well, Central Catholic at that time wasn't in the league, but they were a very, very good team, and they've had great athletic programs down there. The games at Newcastle and Central Catholic, just too much for the Canes. They hand the Canes a 20-6 loss. Now, although it doesn't really affect the conference, it gives you that feeling inside that, wow, we have to be very careful because we haven't played Butler yet. Union goes up to Mercer, which was another tri-county school. Union beats Mercer 12-0. So now the Scotties, with just 2 games remaining, are undefeated. And this is interesting about this 73 season, because Union not picked to be there, and Union going through the situation and just beating people every week. So Union beats Mercer, and we come to the end of the month. The Butler-Newcastle game. Butler comes into Taggart Stadium, and always a tremendous game between Newcastle and Butler. The bands were even competitive, as the halftime looked like a bowl game. And Art Bernardi knew he had to win, or he doesn't make, and I mean win, not tie. But the Canes able to hang in and tie the score at 7. The game ends in a 7-7 tie, pretty much assuring Newcastle of a good finish, as their last game is against Elwood.
Mm-hmm.
Union undefeated. The Scotties can clinch, and the Scotties are going to play Lakeview. Up there, Lakeview, and nobody even talks about the Sailors anymore, but they were a tri-county school. They play on Saturday. Union wins Saturday, October 27th, 13-6, and clinches the tri-county. Now, there's only 1 week left, and when you start and don't have a week 0, your last game is November 2nd.
Yep.
Well, I could remember at this point, the folks in the Newcastle crowd, as we were playing Elwood City, were yelling, next year you'll come up here and get beat against Union, because Union was undefeated. The Canes end up taking rival Elwood City 21-0, as the Scotties beat Neshannock 26-12. The Scotties finished the season undefeated. Now, here's the thing. There were only 3 divisions.
Mm-hmm.
Western Beaver, who plays a lot of ball against Union and Shenango these days, was a Class B school. So the Scotties were going to have to play more playoff games than anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And on November 9th at Shenango High School, the Scotties were getting home field advantage. They played Brentwood and beat Brentwood 10-7. Now, I worked at Rocky's Market. And a lot of people from Union know that Rocky's Market sits right in the end zone of Sox Russo Stadium. Rocky compared Union to Green Bay, Wisconsin, because there was a lot of pride, and that was the meeting place. So Union was going to take on a much bigger physical team the next week, as Union and Freedom were going to get together. That game was going to be at Montour, and guess what happened?
Rain? Lights?
A lot of rain. So much rain that they couldn't line the field. So the game, the first time ever, and people talked about it, the game was postponed. The field was so muddy they couldn't line the field.
And that was I'm sorry, that was all grass at that time too, right?
Right.
Turf.
And when Newcastle goes down to Montour Stadium, that elementary school wasn't on the other side. It was a cliff.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was postponed. While Newcastle was going to take on Gateway. Canes go down, win 21-15, and Union in the makeup game beats Freedom. So we're heading towards what usually isn't done. 3 classifications, 1 county's in 2. The Canes going to play at Pitt Stadium. At that time, the top classification got to play at Pitt Stadium 2 weeks in a row. Union had to take on Springdale, and that game was going to be at Thomas Jefferson. The Scotties were going to play on Friday. And unfortunately for Union, the clock struck 12. As Springdale jumped out to a 20-0 lead. Adams was shut down. And in the second half, Union took to the air. They got 2 scores back. And I remember quite vividly them having an opportunity. It was 4th and about 5. And the Scotties couldn't convert. And Springdale ended up winning the game 2014. That was Union's first loss, and basically it took 3 months. The Canes were in action the next day, and that was the 24th of November. Unlike today, it was cold. There was snow on the ground. They had to plow the field. And for you guys out in Ohio, a call went out down to Columbus as Lindy Laurel called Coach Woody Hayes and said, what kind of shoes would you use on this field? And Woody explained it, because that was artificial turf.
Yep.
The Canes go into Pitt Stadium, scoreless, 3.5 quarters. And just like, and it hurts my heart to say this, the Notre Dame Ohio State game, the last play of the game, the Canes kick a field goal to beat Mount Lebanon 3-0. And it was great vindication for Newcastle in that they got locked out just 3 years before. And the Scotties ended up with a fantastic season.
I'll say so.
So any comments on that? And I hate to use the word story, because that was a real life.
And I just want to add one thing, just to show you how special this Newcastle team was. 3 first-team All-State players: Gilbert Lewis, Rick
Right.
Sumner, and Rick Brazzano.
Exactly.
So those 3 really, really led the team. And Nicky Rapone was second team. I mean, they had it. Just goes to show you how good Newcastle was at this point in
Right.
time.
And keep in mind, John Latino went to Virginia Tech, and
Hmm.
he was a sophomore.
Hmm.
So
Yep.
the Canes, now at coffee, I didn't hesitate to tease my Newcastle buddies. The Union only had 1 loss.
Hmm.
The Canes had a loss and a tie.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, what a thrilling, exciting season. And it hasn't happened anywhere else in the state.
You. Yep. Yep. Absolutely. And you know what's funny, Ange? Now that you say that, guess who Union plays on Friday?
Go ahead. I
Springdale.
know, but
Springdale.
yes,
And Newcastle's down in Montour. Or we
right,
home. We are home. I'm sorry.
right. We're home. The game will be on
Of
NCTV45.
course. No better
So,
place to watch.
we're the longest doing it. And the Canes actually had the first game in the state, high school football game televised, when WKST TV Channel 45, Haney sponsored it, and they aired the game from Taggart Stadium. So 50 years and one great memory for Lawrence
Absolutely.
County, the Scotties, and the Newcastle Red Hurricane.
LC
Josh,
proud.
it was great having you along.
Thank you, Ange. I loved hearing about the 2 team seasons, and I mean, it's a coincidence that Union's going to Springdale on Friday. Now that you
Yeah,
say that,
I mean, and 50 years ago today, what a thought! And the Scotties having a good year.
absolutely. At 4-1, coming off again, we talked about Laurel beating Laurel and Shenango, Elwood City too. The Scotties look good this year, Ange. They could have a chance to make another big run.
Another playoff run, go blue.
Absolutely.
As we wish you all the best, Josh. It was
Thank you,
great
Ange.
having you along. And when you do come home, cooking a castle is waiting for you.
You know me. Nothing excites me more than food.
So, Josh, have a great evening. Great for having you along. And remember, NCTV45, we're available anytime on your time. A train that runs on your schedule, that's NCTV45. Hey, Josh, have a great evening.
You too, Angie.
All our loyal watchers and viewers, we wish you the best. Stay tuned. Our programming day is up next.